finally after months, I was able to get an interview with John McRae, the owner of Tainted Minds, and Oceanic's very own Riot Daniel Ringland. We will finally get the answers we've been asking for. Joining me live via satellite is John McRae. John, you're the owner of Tainted Minds, and you're also part of this media shitstorm that's been hitting since the Tainted Minds controversy first started. You've been accused of bullying a female manager, creating a dangerous work environment, and of course, you and Daniel Ringland allegedly worked together to avoid liability for any of this. How do you respond to any of these allegations? Why am I interviewing a cat? I thought I was interviewing John McRae.
That's actually the owner of Tainted Minds.
Well, I guess that makes a lot of sense considering what happened, but okay. All right. Moving on. We also have an exclusive interview with Riot Oceanic's Daniel Ringland. Now, Daniel, thanks for joining us. The community has a lot of questions about your competitive ruling with Tainted Minds. Did your personal relationship with John McRae create any conflict of interest with your investigation of this situation? And of course, ultimately affecting your final decision on the Tainted Minds ruling? Daniel? Daniel, are you there? Daniel? Here we are again. What I learned from doing the first Tainted Minds video is there's such thing as information saturation or emotional overload. It's very possible to reach a point in which there's just too much information being presented and everything past a point just becomes diminished. There's too much emotional outrage spread over just too many different topics. It's hard to care. There's just no focal point. And the disorientation of so many different outrageous things happening and information reduces the overall effectiveness, and the message to get behind it becomes diminished as well. In other words, it's actually easier to rally people behind the message of a single person or organization doing one thing wrong, or one single thing wrong, compared to them doing hundreds of things wrong. And the best example I know of this is actually Riot Sanjero. This was one guy by himself saying one simple message during one single time frame directed to one single person. There's no split focus. There's not 99 other things that happened during 99 different time frames that he said or did to dilute the severity of what he originally said about Tyler 1. It was basically just one thing that made it really easy to get people to rally against him. But also, the popularity was there to back it up. And ultimately, that's why Riot Games actually had to speak up about it and remedy the situation publicly, is there was just no defense to hide behind. I think there's a unique defense of having so many outrageous things said and done spread out between different people, different time frames within the organization of Tainted Minds, that there's no single focus point. There's no focal point to focus the outrage on, unless you collectively force yourselves to. And that's my goal with this particular video, is not to dilute the argument further, but to bring a focal point of discussion that isn't an hour long and it's easy to get behind. So with that being said, let's revisit the Tainted Minds situation. There are three major points I want you to focus on in regards to the Tainted Minds situation, but also to remind you of what happened. The first being Tainted Minds as an organization lied to players to entice them to come to Australia. They were not native to Australia, contracted these players, broke these contracts, and very likely broke work safety laws. The second being, this caused the coach and the manager and the 5 players, including a minor, to be exposed to a health risk. And through the negligence of Tainted Minds, nothing was addressed, nothing changed, except the consistent undependability of an organization that was sanctioned by Riot Games to hold a position within the OPL ladder. And 3, which caused the players, the coach, the manager, all to reach out to Riot Oceanic about their health concerns. And Riot Oceanic ignores their concerns and puts them in a position where the players and the coach and the manager ultimately can't do anything. And when things finally escalated, Riot Oceanic finally opened an investigation internally riddled with conflict of interest due to the person running the investigation within Riot Oceanic being Daniel Ringland, a person who very likely had personal ties to the owner of Tainted Minds. And the ruling done by Daniel Ringland was also a slap in the face to everyone involved, including the people spectating this. This is what happened. And there's so much more that added to this in my first video, to the major framework of it. But my first video goes into so much detail and it has so much testimony to the point where it starts diluting the severity of what happened and the significance of what happened because there was just so much that happened. But at its core, I think these are the three most important points. Tainted Minds most likely broke laws and work safety regulations, which exposed individuals to health risks, and Riot Games not only didn't help in any meaningful way, but they likely helped Tainted Minds avoid exposure to liability because in turn, it helped Riot Oceanic avoid liability as well. The Tainted Minds situation is just as much Riot Games' fault as it is Tainted Minds' organization. There's an inherent responsibility that Riot Games has for esports, and they're trying to build around. How can anyone take esports seriously if the frontrunner company does not adequately set a good precedent for such matters? And if Riot Games doesn't really care about the players, then it becomes painfully clear that Riot's main motivation for esports is simply advertisement for League of Legends, and not this separate emotional rallying point for gamers that they've tried to brand esports as. I mean, at least they pretend to care, right? I mean, when it's convenient to do so. I found a term that fits to the situation almost perfectly. It's called the waiter rule. The premise is that you can actually judge someone based on how they treat a waiter or waitress in a restaurant. And to go along with it, there's a quote, "Watch out for people who have a situational value system, who can turn the charm on and off depending on the status of the person they're interacting with." Some people view waiters as being in an inferior position and not an equal, so they treat them worse based on that because they see no value in it themselves. I think Riot Games treats players differently based on their value to Riot Games. This is pretty clear with how poorly they've treated issues in smaller regions. I mean, we just recently witnessed this happen with Recrit and Riot Russia. We've seen this happen in the past with Riot Oceanic, the Taiwanese region, the other small regions. Riot Games actively allows their sister organizations to function in a tyrannical fashion. And if you accept this as being true, then you're recognizing that Riot will actively give special treatment to some players or organizations that they see value in, and completely screw anyone over that they see no value in. Remember Renegades, the Tainted Minds situation, Immortals, Recrit? Don't even get me started on the Riot Players Association. When someone brings up that word like, I don't want Valkrin, the Players Association will help out in situations like this. Okay, we're not even going to go into that because that's probably going to be my next video. Suffice it to say, the North American Players Association is not only in its infancy, riddled with problems, mostly conflict of interest, what is new. It most likely won't help players in smaller regions who need it the most, and it probably won't help them for a very long time. And just look at how short pro careers are. They're a blip in the dot of how long League of Legends has even existed so far, which has been a brief period of time when you look at the grand scheme of things. And by the time the help is actually in the smaller regions, I mean, what's the point? And I think ultimately that's what Riot probably decided in some sort of boardroom, was just like, you know what, fuck it. It certainly didn't help Recrit. The absolute biggest regret I have with my first video was just not having a call to action. I had so many people riled up with pitchforks, angry, probably too angry, not directing it in the right way, and there was no real call to action to get something done. Or just solidarity, bringing us together around a common theme within what the topic was. And I want to make up for that with this video. And it's really easy to remember that it's not hard to fall into the trap of feeling powerless in this world. It really isn't. Every day is almost a battle against dealing with your own apathy towards the world because it feels like we don't have an impact on what's happening around us. And when it comes to League of Legends and Riot Games, individually, we don't have a lot of impact with the game. But united, we actually make up the community that plays the game, watches the esport. Without us, there is no continuation. My call to action is for you to tweet hashtag #NeverForgetTaintedMinds. This is not only to show our solidarity, but it's also so we never forget what happened with Tainted Minds and how Riot Games handled the situation. They want us to forget what happened. Tainted Minds changed their name to TM Gaming. Riot shoved this whole thing under the rug and wants you to forget about it and just wants to focus on franchising and moving forward. But these are landmark cases in my mind that very adequately represent the big picture of what Riot Games has allowed to happen. And if they're okay with this, given the very light slap on the wrist they gave Tainted Minds and the fact that they're still an organization, and the fact that they've kicked out organizations like Renegades and not passed applications from Immortals to become a franchised organization within League of Legends, it really makes you question everything about Riot Games. And I, for one, have been a part of this community since the very beginning, since before League of Legends was actually a game. I've been playing since the beta. And I honestly feel very disappointed with how the Tainted Mind situation ended up going. And to this day, the fact that this is just like a topic that people want to go under the rug, it's easy to just sit on the sidelines and let that happen and just watch as all these players and their stories and the testimony and just all the travesty that happened be lost to the passage of time. And if we don't remember the past, then we're destined to repeat it again. And I'm sick and tired of seeing people taken advantage of. And for those of you that say that your tweet won't make a difference and nothing will change, you might be right. But if there's anything I've learned with my life up until this point, it's that if you do nothing, then nothing comes of it. If you do something, sometimes something doesn't immediately happen. But if you want change to happen, real meaningful change, the only thing you can be sure of is that if you do nothing, you have no control of anything. Only by doing something will you ever gain control of your life and affect the world around you. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, never forget Tainted Minds.